You guys, we can hardly believe it, but this is episode 100 of Through the Glass Recovery podcast. To celebrate, we decided to take some time and reflect on how much we've learned and how much we've grown, both in the podcast world and in our own recoveries. When we started this journey nearly 2 years ago, we had no idea we'd go from just having a weekly podcast to creating an entire community of people who were choosing to remove alcohol from their lives and find ways to truly thrive. We are so happy you're part of this community, and we hope you enjoy this chat between just the two of us as we share an insider look at what it's like to be a sober podcaster and what we have in store for the next season.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Steve and Julie. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full, there's no space left for alcohol.
If you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, what are you waiting for? It's free, and it's full of resources that will help you on your recovery journey no matter where you're at. It's your weekly reminder for the Monday night meeting, plus a sneak peek at the topic. And we always include journaling questions to help you learn more about yourself after you've listened to the episode of the week. You can subscribe at throughtheglassrecovery.com. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to our listeners. We are so happy to be here with you today. This is episode 100.
100
of Through the Glass Recovery podcast. So we thought we would do something a little bit different today. We are just going to chat, just me and Steve, and kind of share with you guys some of our thoughts and share with you how much things have changed in the last 2 years since we started doing this. I'm not even sure if I was convinced when we started that we would last 2 years, but we are still going strong and loving what we're doing. So we're here and we're just going to kind of share with you some of the stuff that's going on in our lives and some of the things we've learned along the way. So
loving what we're doing sometimes.
Most of the time.
Well, there's some days that sometimes it feels like a slog.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are some days that it's hard, and there are some days that I have to force myself to sit down and screen an episode and write show notes and all of that.
I think it's important to talk about that stuff. I mean, our social media, from all of the things, right? It looks happy, it looks all of the things, and behind the scenes, sometimes there's struggle.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Sometimes I struggle with my time. Sometimes I struggle with the motivation to do things. That's generally what happens. It's a lot of doing the same thing over and over again and trying to keep it fresh can be difficult sometimes.
Definitely. Yeah. Constantly producing new content is it's a job. And sometimes it is super fulfilling and sometimes it's hard. And it's also worth pointing out, I don't know when we started this that we knew how much time we were going to end up investing. I know back when we first started 2 years ago, we tossed around the idea of, are we going to do this once a week? Are we going to do this twice a month? And we opted for once a week, which seems to be good, but easily just turning out a podcast episode takes 10 hours during the week to, find the guests and record the podcast and edit it and listen to it, screen it, write the show notes, get it all posted up on the internet and in all the places. And that's just to get an episode out. That doesn't even include all of the social media, all of the other things that we do, because we do a lot of different things for the recovery community outside of just producing a weekly podcast.
It's like jack of all trades, master of none.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
can we also talk about how much better the podcast is now than it was when we started? We sound so much more professional. We sound like we know what we're doing a little bit now.
We went through a lot of trial and error at the beginning. I feel almost bad sometimes when somebody hops on episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. I remastered those.
They're still rough.
Yeah, we also just really had no idea what we were doing.
No.
Okay, do you think it would be worth sharing how the podcast came about. Like we slapped together those first 4 episodes in a month.
Yeah. Wow. Slapped together the episodes plus a website. There was no knowing what we're doing. Like, I don't know how to build a website, and I learned in 3 weeks how to build a website, how to publish a podcast, how to do some graphics and things like that. And you learn how to edit audio.
Learned how to edit audio and piece the intro music together and figure out how to produce the audio of a podcast. So we finally said, are we going to do this? And we said, yeah, okay, we have to give ourselves a date to actually.
Right. Well, we talked about it for like 6 months before we actually dove in and did it. Right. It was out there. We want to make a podcast. We want to do a podcast. Ooh, when we have a podcast, we should do this. And the ideas just sat there like out in outer space for the longest time.
I think it's important to tell our listeners also what it was like back in the day where we had to get on Zoom an hour before we recorded a podcast because we had all of the nervous jitters and giggles and all of like the weirdest things. We'd hit record
so that I could giggle. I could get the giggles out.
So
really,
you could get the giggles out because you had to hear the record.
I was so nervous. Every episode, I was so nervous. And our first several episodes were just with friends, just with people we already knew.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd think I wouldn't be that nervous, but oh my gosh, we'd hit that record button and I'd just giggle. I couldn't stop. It was embarrassing.
It was
and hilarious. I didn't want to have to, once we had real guests, people we didn't know, come on, I didn't want to be giggling in front of them. Like, that would just seem unprofessional. And like, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I would let them know that I didn't know what I was doing. Because I
love that's the story you tell yourself, because I would imagine that if you were giggling after we hit record in front of those people, it would have made them giggle too, because laughter is just contagious.
Maybe so, but I really, that wasn't how I wanted to show up.
Of course.
We've come a long way. I don't giggle anymore.
No, that's true.
Yeah, we do a pretty good job of just rocking it these days.
Episode 0, the first episode, it's like what, 7 minutes?
Something. It might be 17 minutes.
Either way. Okay, 17 minutes. That took us how long to record?
Like 2 hours. Because we kept pausing and laughing and screwing up and forgetting what we were going to talk about. And it just felt so awkward.
Oh,
so weird.
We tried to, what's the word here? We tried to perfect it. We tried to like script it. We tried to do all of it. And it was so.
It is. It's totally scripted.
I know.
Like we both wrote out everything we were going to say, and you can tell when you listen to it. I cringe. Our most listened to episode is episode 1. And outside of that, there's a lot of people who listen to episode 0 first, right? Like, oh, a new podcast. I'm going to go back and start at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I cringe because we are so different now than we were back then. Like, episode 0 is just us essentially reading a script that we wrote for ourselves, like introducing ourselves. It's rough.
We also had no idea what we were doing.
None. And we were terrified.
Zero idea what we were doing. I mean, we can always redo that one.
Yeah, I think we talked about redoing it last summer and we never did. We're like, whatever, we'll just leave it.
Yeah, probably because it's going to take us another 3 hours to record 7 minutes. I'm surprised. We're doing actually really good right now.
Yeah, we've come a long way. We're more comfortable now, I think. But no, it's crazy how much the podcast has changed and developed. We've gotten some amazing guests on, and we've been able to meet so many new people. When we started this, we had no idea where we were going to find people to be on the podcast. We started with, a handful of friends that were super supportive of what we were doing and jumped in to help us and show up, which was amazing. And a lot of those people are still regulars because we just love spending time with them and talking to them. But
absolutely.
In that amount of time, I mean, we've reached out to so many great inspirational people and gotten to meet them and hear their stories and made a lot of friends along the way too.
100 episodes. There's like a statistic out there that says there's a ton of podcasts and whatever, and once you get past, what is it, episode 20 or 21 or something like that, you become part of 10% of the people that continue to carry on with the podcast. And once you get past like episode 50 or something like that, that number shrinks to like 2% or something crazy. Like, there's a lot of podcasts out there, but there's not a lot of podcasts that continue to stay. And we've had lots of up and downs.
Definitely.
Through, and you have your own life too, right? We have our own lives that exist behind the scenes. And in recovery, I think there's a lot of growth that happens, and inside of those waves of growth and whatever, sometimes there's a lot of pain behind it.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, it's hard sometimes to show up. Like, there's been times where I've had a really hard time even showing up to record a podcast because life is just really hard right now, right? It's not like our lives are perfect all the time.
Right.
And there are times that it's hard to show up and hard to jump into a conversation about something that, right now isn't what I'm dealing with. So there have definitely been some hard times through all of this that we don't necessarily always talk about right in the moment, depending on what the conversation's about.
Sometimes we'll pick a topic, and that recording's 3 weeks out, and today and tomorrow I'm passionate about that topic, and I feel like I have a lot to add, and some, I feel like I can add value to that conversation. And when that comes up, I'm like, I'm not feeling it anymore. And sometimes it's tough to jump back in. And I think a lot of the times, and this happens more recently now, is the guests really help bring the podcast in and really help drive that conversation, where then I feel like I'm value added afterwards. It's kind of neat how that happens, where we aren't ever really the drivers in this podcast, I don't think.
No, and especially now, our guests definitely are the ones who bring the massive amount of content, and I think there's been a shift there a little bit over the last year or so.
And that's what I think we've tried to do. A couple of the things that we've tried to do is one of the focuses we're working on is just bringing in people that have alcohol as their main addiction. Yeah. And so we can focus on that part of the relatability of everything.
Right. Well, and we get feedback from our listeners, which for anybody listening right now, please continue to give us feedback, because it helps us create content that is valuable and relatable for you. But for so long, we invited anyone on that struggled with addiction, because at its core, addiction is addiction, whether it's alcohol or cocaine or marijuana or whatever it is. We're all fighting a similar battle, and recovery looks really similar. But a lot of times I think stories, when our primary listener base, and for Steve and I both, our main struggle is alcohol. So we got some feedback from listeners that let us know, like, they really have a hard time relating to some of the people who their main problem was some kind of drugs or something other than alcohol. So we decided to kind of make the shift towards focusing on just people who struggle with alcohol. And that's a direct result of the feedback that we've gotten from our listeners. So definitely encourage our listeners to keep giving us feedback. Tell us when we have a guest on that you love that you'd like to hear back, or tell us if there's a topic that you're really wanting to listen to some thoughts on, or tell us if there's something you hate that you really don't like that we did, so we can stop doing it or we can make some changes. That helps us so much when it comes to the kind of content that we're creating, because we aren't doing this for us, we're doing this for you guys. And we're trying to bring together content that would have served us well earlier in our own journeys, and some of the things that we would have needed. But the most valuable thing is when we hear what other people are needing, so that we can steer our direction closer to that.
Feedback, whether it's positive or negative, like, hey, could you this isn't working out for me. It helps us think outside of the box or bubble that we're currently thinking in, because we're always looking for new ideas. Mm-hmm. We're always looking for how can we make the podcast better, because we do this every once in a while. We sit down, we actually have business meetings where we try and figure out what direction we want to go and how we want to take it, and who are guests that we think, and we want to really do want to keep trying to make this thing better, and bring more value and a different take. But it's also, we don't feel the need to be controversial or do anything crazy. I think we just want to bring some really valuable conversations, and that all comes down to, this is what helped us.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And that's why we have this podcast, because conversations like this were exactly what we needed to start growing and moving forward. And so we decided to just recreate that and make it something everybody else can listen to. Can we shift this a little bit and talk about how much we've grown as people? We're talking about feedback. And 2 years ago, if somebody had given me feedback like, hey, so I'm really not relating to the podcast that you're making at all, I would have just been crushed. I would have been like, okay, fine, I can't do this. I'm a failure.
And then we would have spent like 3 days talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I'm like, thank you so much for the feedback. Now that this is a sign that it's time to shift course a little bit. And just the growth there is incredible. And I think that's not just because of the podcast. I think that's because I've got an extra 2 years of recovery work in there. But when it comes to stuff like that, just handling things in life, not just podcast related, gosh, I'm just such a completely different person now than I used to be.
2 years ago, I was still really good at taking things personally.
Yeah.
I think that's probably where it starts, is I was still really good at 2 years ago. We started this thing back in September of 2022.
Right.
I was just over a year sober. So March.
No, you were a year and a half sober, because I was just at a year.
You were just at a year.
Yeah.
And if I go back to that and I compare where I am now to what that looked like, I was a pretty vulnerable puppy.
Right. Absolutely.
Like, I really was. I was still fairly emotionally raw.
Yeah.
And, I was still following my heart. Just, yeah, like, that was a tough time.
Right.
Just trying to figure out everything else.
Right.
And wow.
Like, we were completely different people 2 years ago than we are now. And it's crazy how, when you start growing, how fast you start changing in ways that you weren't even expecting. Whether that's emotionally or actually in your life, making actual logistical changes in your life or whatever that looks like. It's just, the growth is incredible.
Yeah, like what I wrote down a couple of questions just for fun. What were you doing back in September of 2022 when we fired this thing up? Like, where actually were you mentally, physically, and then compare it to now? That gap is huge.
Right. Well, and bigger for you than me, probably, as far as where you're at in your life. Like, you've made some massive life changes that I haven't made. So you're in a completely different place physically than I am. But if we look at mentally, emotionally, like you said, really raw still. I was barely a year sober, not quite a year when we were recording our first episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And everything was so raw. Everything was still so unknown. And I was just figuring out who I was and just starting to kind of like that version of myself. And, that whole first year of being sober, it's a really raw, vulnerable, sensitive time. And, it's still day to day as far as how I would feel or what I could handle or any of that stuff. And things are so much more stable now. Like, no matter what's going on in your life, the first year and a half of sobriety, it's like roller coaster up and down, and it just gets more stable and steady the longer you stick with it.
I'm just listening to you and I'm like, it was so easy to get emotionally slapped around.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Like, and I'm not saying by anybody else. It's completely self-inflicted.
Right.
Yeah. But the ups and downs we're still pretty wild compared to now. I feel like I'm a lot more stable I mean, I still have my ups and downs, but
Yeah.
they're that's that crazy roller coaster is it's definitely like stretched out, so it's not so high and it's not so low, and there's a lot of but um so where were you now? Yeah, so I was still married. I was still living in the old house, and now I'm going to school in Colorado.
Right. Yeah, you've made some massive life changes.
So
Huge.
just from Ontario to, yeah, I've taken my fair share of leaps of faith so far.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And that's not a lot of the stuff that, we talked about on the podcast for the most part. The
Mm-hmm.
divorce, the moving out into my own apartment, and then moving into my parents' place, and now literally just about to move 1,600 miles away
Right.
and restart the education process again, taking my bachelor's of business or bachelor's of social work, something I still need to figure out, but I'm super excited to, that's a, next part of my journey, and hopefully somewhere along the lines it'll reflect in this podcast too. I'm honestly right now, I'm I'm a little bit, you can see I'm fumbling over my words. I'm a little bit worried about how I'm going to support the podcast the same way,
Mm-hmm.
with the time that's involved in it, and spending time with school, and I'd like to work a little bit. And so figuring out what that is going to look like is going to be a whole bunch of, I'm going to turn into a jester here and start juggling just time.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so because we do this together, it always turns into a learning curve for both of us.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, and we each take turns picking up slack too. Depending on what's going on in our lives, sometimes we don't have the time to devote to things. And, like I was saying before, it's maybe 10 hours to put one podcast episode together. But then, we each spend an hour or 2.5 at a weekly meeting with the people that we love. And we spend a lot of time in some different communities that we've created, like the Facebook group, and we have a Telegram group that's for clients. And so we spend a lot of time there. And then we create a lot of content for social media because we want to get our podcast out there and we want to get it into the hands of people who need to hear it. And there's a lot of time and effort that goes into that for both of us. And so, when life gets busy or hectic or hard for one or the other, then that means the other person's over there kind of picking up the slack. And we've learned to just kind of shift and roll with the tide there, whenever that looks like. But we're definitely rolling into a new level here, I think, with you starting school and doing all of that stuff.
And it's just going to be, like, we have coaching clients too, where that time needs to get managed into life, and learning how to develop that craft. We just took a
absolutely.
motivational interviewing course with an amazing woman.
Yeah.
Learned a lot there. That was a really super cool experience, and maybe get to do that again with her in August.
Yeah. It's really cool to do things that give us more skills to help other people. And that's what all of this comes back down to, the podcast and the website and the meetings and the coaching and all of it is just, it gives us such a sense of purpose and passion that we are able to take our stories, which are, at their core, they're sad and they're painful. And, there's a lot of shame that we had to overcome to move through these stories. And now we can use those to kind of shine a light for other people. And so to be able to take courses that help us do a better job of that is just a gift, I think.
Absolutely. What are you looking forward to for season 3?
Ooh, for season 3, like specifically podcast related?
Yeah, like
or just like the next year in general?
Both.
Okay. Well, I think it's super cool that you're going to live close enough that we can make content together instead of trying to make content and mash it up from 1,600 miles apart or just occasionally get to hang out in person. So it's going to look, I think social media especially is going to look different because we're close enough that we can get together and actually make some content together. So that is super cool. And I also love the shift that we've done recently where we've kind of brought in topics that are more specialized or a little bit more specific. And so we're able to, like we have a pool of regular guests that we can bring on and start talking about some things that, not just anybody can talk about. So I think it'll be cool to turn out some new content because after a while, it feels like we're repeating a lot of the same subjects and topics. So we've kind of opened ourselves up to some new topics, I think, with that recent change.
Yeah, and I think there's still topics out there that we haven't touched that we're probably gonna touch on coming up, and that's your feedback. Again, give it to us. Send us a DM. Send us a message. Like, we're always, and also if it's something that you're passionate about and something you want to talk about,
yes,
send us a message and say, hey, I'd love to be on your podcast and let's talk about this. This is something I'm really passionate about, something I have a lot of experience with. I don't know if it's like ADHD and recovery or something like that. Maybe we can grab a whole group of people, 2 other people, and join you in that conversation and, a little bit more specific. And you had Cora on. That was an amazing experience as well. Trying to incorporate some more video into our social media is going to be something I'm looking forward to that and dreading it all at the same time because it's going to be additional work for me.
Right.
But at the same time, I think there's a lot of value in that. And at the same, so we chosen to do audio only to keep the anonymous part there so we can get some of those voices that they're hard to get because they don't want to be seen. It's not something that's part of their recovery for them. And we want to be able to respect that. And so I think figuring out how to use video, and still maintain that level of respect. And that's what we're going to try and do here upcoming in season 3 is give people the opportunity or ask them. And it's going to be an easy yes or no. And it's not going to be a problem that we're going to have. We're not going to produce the whole podcast on video and let it fly on YouTube, but we're going to use clips and we're going to use some of that so we can give that to you guys and take some of the cool, important things that were said from our guests and get that shared out.
Right. Okay, so I have a question. What is still hard? And that could be podcast related or recovery related, but what's still hard for you?
Time management.
Yeah.
I've got a squirrel brain. It's hard enough for me to concentrate. We've discovered that if we give Steve a lot of, what would you call them, Julie? Tasks.
Tedious tasks.
Tedious. We give Steve the tedious tasks. He's very good at them.
Right.
The song list that I created from everyone else on Facebook it took me like 20 hours to do plus, because I listened to every song. It was a 14-hour playlist, and I got a lot of joy in that. So It's give me the tedious stuff. I think that's why I probably enjoy editing the audio. It's meticulous. It's tedious. I didn't know that about myself.
Right.
Until just really recently.
Yeah.
Where
we've both discovered, I think, a lot of our strengths that we didn't even know that we had throughout this whole process.
Yeah, I didn't. I had no idea that if you gave me like that really tedious tasks that I would just dive right in. I don't know. I think my mind is a fairly quiet mind.
Right.
already. It's not active. It's easily distracted.
Right.
It's easily distracted, but it's a fairly quiet mind.
Mhm.
And it's actually sometimes I get frustrated because I feel like it should be more active.
Right. And I'm the dead opposite because I'm like our creative powerhouse. I'm the one that has the constant ideas, and we have to pare it down and figure out what ideas we can actually chase. And my mind doesn't ever shut off. Definitely would go in spurts with creativity. So I'm like, oh, I have 14,000 ideas today. And then the next week I'm like, I got nothing at all. So, but we learn how to work with all of it. I think the thing that's hardest for me, and it's probably going to stay this way forever, is social media. And when we first started this, we were like, oh, we are going to have to make an Instagram and a Facebook if we're going to do this. And neither one of us was super excited about doing social media. I actually quit social media completely the day I quit drinking. So I shut down my Facebook. I was really active on Facebook, just in my personal life when I was still drinking. And the day that I quit drinking, I also shut down my Facebook, and I loved it that way. So it's coming back into social media, even from a business perspective, to me is really tough. And there are days that I definitely have the energy for it and I have the mindset for it. And there are days that I don't. But like I remember the first time we were like, oh my gosh, like people make reels on Instagram. We are gonna have to make reels. And
I
we were
remember
like,
that
well,
day.
shit.
And
We're gonna have to make videos.
and then I remember you making a reel and then posting it and then saying, "Fuck that! I'm never doing this again."
I cried. I
Yeah.
cried.
Oh yeah.
But
It was.
it was so hard for me to post my picture, let alone video of myself on the internet for the public to see, like with the intention of drawing public attention. And that all goes back to like my struggles with like the way that I look, right? I
Self-image.
grew up, yeah, self-image stuff.
Yeah.
I grew up in just an environment that was so toxic when it came to self-image. And so all I see when I look at myself are things to judge. So to be able to just post a picture, let alone videos, is a huge, huge sign of growth for me. But it's still, depending on where my mood is and depending on how like confident I'm feeling, it is still emotionally taxing to put video out and reels and things like that.
Your level of confidence has improved. I can't even put a number to it because it's changed so much.
Oh, dramatically, absolutely.
But your level of confidence within yourself and your self-image and the way you look and how, even when you talk about like, I'm not wearing makeup behind the seats, I'm not wearing makeup, screw that, I'm not going to make it real. It's true. Like
It's totally
that's
true.
the words that come right out of your mouth, and
Absolutely.
nobody cares. And if they do, I'll tell them where they can shove it, right? Because the sun doesn't shine there. It's a really dark space. But anyways, at the same time, like it's all completely valid. And I know you're not the only one that does that. And there's people that are out there that are friends of ours that think you're brave as hell. Because doing what you're doing is difficult. There's a major level of exposure there. Right now, with the whole social media thing, you're going through the same thing you went through when you had the self-image things. It's almost like the same sort of reaction that you're having when you started this journey, making a reel and then deleting everything and throwing your phone across the room.
Yeah.
That's not it.
It's vulnerable, right? It is super. You were putting yourself out there with like opening yourself up to the chance of rejection. And for a lot of us, rejection is like this thing to be desperately avoided, right? So it is a scary thing to put yourself out there in that way. But it's also really empowering. And there's a certain amount of like, you know what? And at the end of the day, I love me. The people that matter in my life are still going to love me, even if I make a terrible reel or even if I don't have makeup on or whatever it is. And to be able to lean into that and trust that is huge. And that's something that's new to me in the last 2 years for sure, is just the confidence to do it. And let alone putting our picture and our video up on the internet for the whole world to listen to us talk about how we're alcoholics. Like that is That's a big deal. That's a scary
Stings.
thing to do.
Standing in front of the damn stigma.
Absolutely. Which it feels good now, but God, that was really scary at first.
Oh, yeah.
When we first made the podcast, we were talking about, do we put our pictures
Sure.
on the website? And that was a hard decision to make because we weren't sure we really wanted to do it.
We both came out on Facebook right before we put the podcast out.
Yeah, we realized we had to because people were going to see it. People were going to hear about it. And we needed to kind of own it first. Right.
Yeah. And we kind of, our feet were pretty held to the fire.
Yeah.
We did it to ourselves.
Absolutely.
Self-inflicted.
No
Self-inflicted. No regrets.
No regrets.
No, it's been a really amazing thing. For season 3, outside of that, I'm sure I don't really have any crazy big guests lined up for season 3 yet, but we always seem to find magical people to join us.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that same thing is going to happen again.
One of the coolest things that happens, and I think most of our listeners have probably kind of figured this out, but we don't pick the guests that are going to come together on an episode and like stack them intentionally. We go out and we ask people if they'd like to be on the podcast, and we send them a calendar and it's got all of the recording dates on it, and they pick the date that works for them. So when we show up to a podcast recording with 3 other people, it's random. They just pick what date works for them. And so we have 3 random people. And so often those people get together and they needed to meet. Like, it was destined that they were going to cross paths because they each have something that the other person needed to hear, or, they have gifts to share or services to share. And it's the neatest thing. Like, it is absolutely just intended when people come together and meet that way. So it's been really neat to see that and see some relationships develop because they came on the podcast and ended up together because their schedules just aligned that day. And then to see the things that they end up producing together or building together is just amazing.
Yeah, some of the collaborations that have come out of it,
mm-hmm.
and relationships that have come out of it after the fact has been super cool. Some of the collaborations and relationships that we've made.
Yeah.
Because you throw this out there and, people believe in it's to be honestly, this is super helpful, especially for me, is that there's people out there that believe in what we're doing. Not just me, not just you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's days where we have to prop each other up. It's like, just have to, keep going and keep doing the thing. Year 1, I feel like I had a whole bunch of pizzazz and energy, and our energy always seems to die off in the last month and a half.
Hence the summer break thing.
Yeah. But there was a lot of energy in year 1, season 1. It was new. Season 2 felt like a little bit more of a slog. I think season 3 it's gonna, it's just like the emotional roller coaster. I think season 3 is gonna be, it's gonna come back up a little bit again. I think that just happens. I don't know what it's like when you have 7 seasons of a podcast and the emotional roller coaster that goes along with, developing something like that. But it would be super cool to, be episode 1000.
Right.
Like, that would be wild. Yeah. It's a long way to go. But wouldn't that be cool? Can you imagine?
Right. Absolutely.
Even double where we're at right now, episode 200.
Yeah.
The amount of growth, personal growth that has happened within the 2 years of doing this. I can only imagine how that extrapolates.
Mm-hmm.
What it looks like afterwards. How do you change things? What do you do to better serve the audience? There's so much, things change so fast.
Right.
What is your biggest pet peeve
when it comes to the podcast?
Yeah.
People not showing up.
Yes,
it drives me crazy. Like, I totally understand that schedules, don't always work out and you schedule something, you think you're going to be able to be there and then you can't be there. But for the love of all things holy, like send a message and be like, hey, I can't show up today or whatever, give us some notice, but don't just totally stand us up completely because it's really frustrating and it totally throws off our whole game. So that's my biggest pet peeve is, follow through or at least give a heads up and say, hey, I can't do it.
Do you remember the beginning of season 2 when the universe was like, we are going to have a whole bunch of people not show up to the first 4 episodes?
Oh, the universe was like, oh, show me how bad you really want
this
right?
podcast to work out.
Right.
It was nasty.
Oh.
It was nasty. We had how many reschedules? We had one episode where one person showed up out of the 3 that were supposed to, and which is why now if you see an episode with 2 people,
it's
because somebody didn't show up. That's how that's how that works now.
Well, it's super weird because season 1, we never had that problem.
No,
everybody always showed up. Everybody was really reliable and consistent. Season 2 started off like with the first episode we were going to record of season 2. Nobody showed, or like 2 out of the 3 just bailed, like without no call, no show. And it just that kicked off a whole season of struggle when it came to getting people to actually show up.
I had backup guests on basically speed dial.
Yeah.
So I was literally making phone calls. There was one episode we recorded like half an hour, 45 minutes late because I was making phone calls and filling spots. Like, I am incredibly grateful for the people that we had, especially in that time, but they're still around. But the people that we had that were willing to, it was some of them, it was their very first podcast episode. Leah, Haley,
right.
It was
jumped on at the very last minute. Like, sure, I'll be on a podcast. That was amazing.
And to just show up and be there and support and not know what they're doing at all and just because they wanted to help out. Like, I'm extremely grateful for those. Robbie, he's pitched in a bunch of times. We had a couple of people. Matt. Yeah. Like last minute, I'm calling people and I'm sure I'm missing some names, but either way, that was a really, really tough period of time. That was the universe basically saying, how bad do you really want this podcast to work out?
Right. Yeah, but we've made it through and we've learned how to adapt and be flexible, right? I mean, that's another one of those skills in recovery. You learn to adapt, you learn to flex, you learn to go with the flow. The things that you can't control, I don't think they shake you quite as badly the longer you do this and the more you practice being flexible. I know that so many skills and experiences from the podcast are directly reflected in my own life, whether that's just communication or learning how to be flexible or learning to do things. Yeah, I have a faith now in my ability to learn how to do new things that I didn't have before, because there's been so many different things that I've just had to learn and just had to figure out. And that's something that I definitely can carry with me, not just from the podcast, but all the way through life.
It's been a journey, hasn't it?
Definitely. I feel like before we wrap this up, we should talk a little bit about recovery coaching and what we do now, because I think that's something we kind of don't push it. We're not super salesy. It's not our strong suit to be in your face pushing sales and trying to make money. But I also think it's something probably important that we talk about a little bit so people know what that looks like. And, when we started this podcast, I don't think either one of us had any idea that was going to be a journey that we would take. But the more we, put episodes out there and the more we put ourselves out there talking about the things that we were learning, the more we had people coming up to us and approaching us, asking for support and asking for help. And we kind of realized we needed to take some courses and get some education so we could really help people in the most effective and healthy ways. So yeah, we took recovery coaching courses through CCAR, Connecticut Center for Addiction Recovery, I believe is what CCAR stands for, and harm reduction and becoming trauma responsive and ethics and values of recovery coaching. So we did all of that a year and a half ago now. And now we've both developed coaching practices too. And I think it's just important to make sure that people know that that's an option, because there's so many different versions of support that are out there. You can go to meetings, you can go, get on a Facebook group or get on an app and whatever that is. But coaching is also a really great option. And I think it's a great option for people who aren't ready to jump into a meeting yet, but who really need somebody to talk to and are feeling alone. Or if they're just feeling stuck and kind of needing some direction and some guidance. I think coaching is such a good option for that.
It's a personal levels of support that, and I think the biggest struggle is it's a personal level of support, but it's also a personal level of accountability.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you get both out of it. And when I say personal level, like, one of the things, it's really hard to tell someone or let someone know that this is what you're going to get when you get it. But you get like full access to either you or myself. And we really make an effort to, if you need me now, then I will do what I can to do that and talk or phone calls and stuff like that. There's the one thing in addiction and recovery that stops us from getting anywhere is shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's incredible to watch people grow. I think this is the greatest gift that comes out of this is to sit with someone when the light comes on and the room is dark.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I don't know how to, like, I wish I could give that to anyone, but like, you got to step in the room and then I'll help you find the light switch.
Mm-hmm.
But I need you to step in the room.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part. The hardest part is stepping in the room and knowing, and that's what we're here for.
Mm-hmm.
The shame. You're not alone.
It's all the fear. It's a really scary thing. It takes so much courage to reach out, ask for help, and make the decision to walk away from the thing that has been your support and has been your primary coping mechanism for everything hard in life. Like, it takes a massive amount of courage to say, okay, I'm ready to take back my life and learn how to do this and learn how to love myself and learn how to love this life that I'm living now, and to leave behind everything you knew. And it's a gift also to be the person that gets to walk alongside someone who's finally had the courage to take that step.
Yeah, it's the hardest, most beautiful road you'll ever travel.
Yeah, absolutely. And we make it a point to when we're working with clients, to make sure that we're figuring out where they're at and what they're needing and finding ways to meet those needs. I know you'll see online, like, there's, all these different recovery coaches or recovery gurus or whatever that are like, all you have to do is follow my steps and make it, work your way through my workbook and you'll stay sober. And like, this recovery does not work like that. Recovery doesn't work like, here's this box of tools and this is going to work for you and then you're going to be sober. Like, recovery is so individual and so unique based on each person. And our primary goal is to help people figure out what that looks like and then help make sure we're putting the right tools and resources in front of them so that they can use them and then walk alongside them while they practice using them. So it's different for every single person. When I sit down with someone to do like a discovery call, I've been asked before, so what is your program? Well, I don't really have a program. I'm not going to try to fit you into a box. I'm going to figure out what you're needing and then we're going to create whatever that looks like together. So we're making sure we're meeting all of your needs. And
we have a toolbox, right? we have a huge toolbox that we can give you.
Right.
And our premise, what we're trying to do is we have that conversation with you. We sit down and, just like what you said, Julie, find out what tools you are needing, and then we can help you open that toolbox and then give you some of those tools and explore that, and, turn that wrench, turn that whatever it may be, but it comes with support. Like, you don't just get, here's the 25 things you need to do in the next 30 days to get you to where you want to go. Because then you have to sift through all of it to find out what you actually need.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can just find out what you actually need and then help you work on those, that's the goal.
Yeah, we're shaking out all of the busy work in the middle where you're, there's so many free resources available on Facebook and on Instagram and on the internet and blogs and things like that, which is awesome. And we produce an awful lot of free content also, but excuse me. But to have someone sitting down with you, understanding exactly where you're at, understanding exactly what you're struggling with right now, and be able to just put the right tool in your hand at that moment is so much different than just trying to reach out there and read all of the quit lit and, save all of the PDFs and read all of the blogs and things like that and try to figure out what it is that you're needing. Like that's where we specialize in understanding where you're at and identifying what your needs are, and then helping you grab onto that tool and figure out how to implement it in your life and then moving forward. So it's just very specialized. It's very unique, and it's very individual for each client where they're at, because no two people show up needing exactly the same thing. And we all have our own different life experiences that we're carrying through this journey with us that shape the way we see everything and the way we do everything. So what Steve and I do is try to figure out exactly what that looks like for you, and then figure out how we can help you move through it in a way doesn't feel like pulling teeth, and is actually fun. Recovery is actually fun. I think that's the thing we want people to realize, because how often do you see people who've been sober for 20 years and they still hate life and they still wish they were drinking? And we want to turn it into something that feels like a fun journey. I mean, it'll be hard, but it's an awful lot of fun too.
Yeah, with the hard comes the easy. Like it literally goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
And
yeah, absolutely.
It's hard to see it when you're in the middle of it, but we want to help people whoever comes knocking on our door.
Yeah.
Walk through it. We have a support group on Telegram that we add our clients to if they're interested. We have a support group on Zoom that everyone is welcome to join. And it's much like the podcast. That's where the podcast come from, was it was developed. It was the Zoom meetings that we went to. And I hate saying meeting because meeting has such a horrible connotation. And it's got this, I feel like I need to be careful with my words, but it's got this, like you say it out loud and you can see even the reaction on social media. Like there's an instant cringe because it always seems to go back to AA because that's where meetings were and blah, blah, blah. And there's so many negative experiences out there. And I know there's a whole bunch of positive ones, and there's a bunch of amazing people that have come out of the program. Like it helps people. But there's people where it hasn't helped them. And just as many people as it's helped, you can see online, because those voices are pretty loud, that there's just as many people that it hasn't, and that's fine. Those are the people I want to reach. Those are the people that were like me. It helped me.
Right.
It just wasn't something that I connected with that was going to help me grow to the level that I wanted to grow to, and I didn't know that until later on. So the whole meeting thing, and I'm using lots of hand gestures and squishy faces and the thing, like, it's got such a bad name sometimes, but it's literally like so helpful.
Well, and we've tried different names, right? We call it like a sober Zoom hangout session and Zoom support group. And like, we don't know the right words to use because we know the word meeting just has such a negative connotation. But regardless, it's basically a place where a whole bunch of people that are in recovery, that are getting sober from whatever their substance of choice is, we just hang out and we just support each other, and we laugh a lot and we cry sometimes, and we just show up for each other. And I think connection is the most valuable piece of recovery, whether that's just connection with a coach or, just a friend in recovery, or whether that's at a support group or hangout or shindig or whatever.
We've called it all of those things. Too.
We
Like
have. We called it a
sober.
shindig.
We called it a shindig. I still have a reel, I think, of me saying it.
So
A
no,
shindig.
and I think we definitely would love for people to come check out all of the different things that we offer. And if I know a lot of the people that are listening have already checked out a lot of it, but anybody that's hearing this for the first time, there's so many different resources on our website that are free. And obviously, we have the coaching too, so check that out for sure. And we would love to support you in whatever way is best for you. That is our goal. That is where we get our fulfillment. That's our whole purpose in being here. We needed the support and the help when we first started getting sober, and we know how valuable it is. So now we're here doing our best to spread that around and share it with anybody that can benefit from it. So
Absolutely.
we should probably wrap this up, Steve. We're like
I
an
was
hour now.
thinking
We've
we
been
were
talking
gonna.
for a while.
I didn't know how this was gonna go. I think we did pretty good.
It's fun to reflect. It really is cool. And there's a lot of value in reflecting on how far you've come, whether it's, in any part of your life. There's so much value. So it's been fun to talk about it.
It's been fun to talk about it. I don't know when we'll get another chance to do this again, but I think this whole video is gonna go up.
Okay, cool.
I can see the look on your face.
Even the part where I'm like scratching my nose.
Oh yeah, I'm scratching my nose too. I'm like,
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
but
Awesome.
we'll give it a try, and and I think it'll be cool to give our guests and our audience a little glimpse of how we feel about things,
What it's like behind the scenes.
what it's like behind the scenes, because it's not always pretty.
Right.
We've learned a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to what season 3 is going to bring. The struggles. I always learn through the struggles. And,
All the joy and fulfillment too, though. It's great. It's a good experience.
There's always so much.
Yeah.
There's always so much. It's going to be another surprise, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to giving you guys, all of you, some more unique conversations about topics that hopefully are important to you.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Thank you all so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you all so much for hanging out with us on episode.
For supporting us all of this time. We've got people who've been listening since episode 0, and they're still listening every week, and that is amazing. And we appreciate you so much. Sorry, I interrupted your final episode 100 thing there.
Nailed it. I think I was going to get there maybe, but I'm not sure. But you guys, the listeners, people in recovery, this is why we do this.
Yeah.
This is really why it started and why we're still here. And you guys, y'all people that done be supporting us through all of this. Anyways, I'm moving to the US, so y'all is going to be a thing that I have to start learning. Anyways, that's going to be awkward to post on the internet. Anyways, no, thank you guys.
Yeah. Thank you to everybody.
From the bottom of our hearts, and I'm going to speak for both of us because it's been a pleasure these past 2 years, and thank you for all of the support you've given us. Episode 100. Thank you so much for all of your support in these last 100 episodes. We appreciate you all so much. So thank you for being a part of this journey. If you're looking for a great way to support what we're doing here, make sure you leave a review on whatever platform you're listening from. It goes a long way in helping us reach more people. Thank you.